Take you to Louisville, Kentucky now, where demonstrators have been protesting over the shooting dead of Breonna Taylor, who was a black woman in her own home during a police raid in March. Let's take you now to Louisville. We can speak to activist Jecorey Arthur, who is a professor at Simmons College, who has been at those protests. Thank you very much for joining us. How was the protest? Was it peaceful?
It was peaceful, and what we have to realize about protests and people calling them violent protests is that violence is about something or someone being harmed or destroyed. We are protesting, and in some cases, something is destroyed. But on the flip side, we have our own police officers destroying some bodies, some ones. So we want to be very clear when we talk about violence that property is not more important than people.
So there was no sign of Antifa or any of these other radical groups that people say are taking over the protests?
That's happening a little bit, but the people here locally just want systematic changes. We want the law to change. We want local leadership and government to change. We want to make sure this doesn't happen again in 50 years, because 50 years ago around this time, the National Guard came to our city and they killed 2 black teens. Well, they came again this last week and they killed another man who was defending himself and defending his people when they should have not been in our neighborhood in the first place.
How much anger was there already in your city after the death of Breonna Taylor?
Louisville might be the capital of American racism, because not only do we have overt racism where you very clearly see the lines of demarcation with the racial wealth gap, you also have covert racism where there are certain families who control this city and own everything, and we will never be allowed into certain classes. We remain a bottom caste as Black Americans who descend from slavery. So Breonna Taylor to in 2020 all the way to the 1820s, when our police department was first founded, we have been fighting racism for centuries.
And is the feeling, Jecorey, from people in your city, black people particularly, that enough is enough now? Are you at that point?
Oh, absolutely. We're done. And this is the perfect opportunity to reset this country, because we have access to so much information through smart technology. We aren't in the 60s anymore, where media was somewhat slow, where we didn't have the internet and Google at the tip of our fingers. This will never happen again. And I will make sure of it as I campaign for Metro Council in our city, and I work with organizers like Chanel Helm and Black Lives Matter in our local chapter to make sure it doesn't happen and our kids don't have to march in 50 years from today.
So, Jecorey, where would you start? What's the first thing you'd do?
So we have a list of demands that are present right now. You can follow Black Lives Matter on social media, or you can follow me, Jecorey Arthur, on social media and share those demands out. And these are action items, not only through legalities, but also just through making sure it's socially and understanding how we should operate and move in this city and how people should think about racism. Because for too long, we have been avoiding the issue, and now we're seeing it implode on itself.
But what's the best thing that you can do to potentially not just change things that are institutionalized, but change a mindset? Because that can take years.
My favorite Malcolm X quote is that it's not progress to pull a knife out of someone's back. You have to heal that wound. And in most cases, people don't even acknowledge that the knife is there, let alone healing it or taking the knife out. So once we have those conversations, not only as adults, as elders, but in our school system, from kindergarten through 12th grade, we need to be talking about racism, because this country is founded on stolen land, and all of that land was cultivated and built by slaves. So when we come to terms with that truth, we will be able to move forward in that truth and fix our future.
How important is the spirit of truth and reconciliation? How important is it that that is reflected in the actions and the words of your president?
Oh, you cannot fix what you will not face. So if he doesn't acknowledge the racism, and by acknowledge, I mean not simply giving us talking points or lip service, he has to put his money where his mouth is. We are owed centuries worth of reparations, not only from 250 years of slavery, but also 100 years of legal and illegal oppression and discrimination under the Jim Crow laws that made segregation separate and unequal a possibility.
But Jecorey, do you trust that he will, President Trump, or are you waiting for November and possibly a change of president?
Oh, I don't trust President Trump. I don't trust Joe Biden, who actually put more black men in jail than there are women in jail on the entire planet. We don't trust any president that we've had, including a Barack Obama, because he did nothing for black people in America. We have to demand an agenda from our presidents to our state politicians to our local ones and make sure they follow it. And we have to use our power as voters to make sure that they meet those demands.
So when you say you need to demand, do you mean through protest? Are you prepared to use, what methods are you prepared to use?
Oh, protest is one way for sure, but also mentally and making sure we are politically educated so that we can be in these spaces with politicians and have an understanding of how they meet those demands, how we change legislation. The protests, those are just the babies. Those are the loud folks, the youngsters. But we have people like myself, millennials and on up, that are willing to change it from inside of the office, even if we got people outside of the office ready to burn it down.
So how heartened are you by just the range of people who are coming out across America to support the protesters and to express their dismay and anger at the death of George Floyd and that kind of institutional racism in the police force?
Oh, it's about time. From George Floyd to Breonna Taylor right here in Louisville, Kentucky, we are glad the world is recognizing that America owes a debt specifically to Black Americans who descend from slavery. And that debt includes reparations. It includes a package because we are the only group in this country who has suffered at the hands of legal mistreatment. So we need special treatment to fix what was broken centuries ago.
You mentioned young millennials, people of your age as well. Do you think there's a divide between how young Black men and women of your age feel about this issue and, you know, the older members of your community who fought a different or an earlier struggle?
Oh, there's definitely a divide, but because we have access to information, we're all starting to realize that these issues are impacting us and will continue to impact us unless we do something about it. It's not enough that my great-grandmother experienced these riots 50 years ago in the 60s, because now I'm experiencing them. So I have a decision to make as a millennial. Am I going to let my 2-year-old march in 50 years, or am I going to stop it right now? And we have the power to stop it right now. We've been here before, we've done this before, and I'm ready, and all of us are ready to make sure it never happens again.
Jecorey Arthur, thank you very much for joining us from Louisville, Kentucky. Thank you. Let's take you